I'm going to be talking about cross-curricular lessons up next on Gifted Guzman. So it's that time of year again when we start planning for our classrooms and planning what we want to do for lessons and just getting all ready for school. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately, I started thinking about it actually last school year, and I've kind of thought about it off and on over the years, is creating cross-curricular lessons. So what a cross-curricular lesson does is it ties together all of the core content, and you can really bring in the electives too. It's a little difficult in middle school just because they're scattered to so many different electives, and it might not be as easy for the electives to align it and have the same idea that you have, but it's definitely something that you can broach at your campus and see if this is something that people at your campus want to do even as far out as into the electives. So for me, in order to create a cross-curricular lesson, the first thing that I need to do personally is I need to think of a theme that's going to encompass all of the things that the students are learning about in all of the different core subjects, so that then we can each come back to the theme and bring the students' minds back to the theme so that they're seeing how each of these things that seem separate from one another actually have a connection to one another. So what I'm going to show you today is for 7th grade science, social studies, and English language arts, I couldn't think of the word, for the state of Texas, okay? So this could work in yours, depends on if you're using Common Core or whatever, and if you need some help thinking of how to make something cross-curricular, please reach out to me and I'll be glad to help you out. But let me show you what I'm thinking of for 7th grade for Texas, okay? So I'm going to go to my computer so that you can see some of where I'm going. So the first thing that I thought of for this unit is I thought of the theme, like I said before, and for the theme, I thought of parts of a whole. The reason I thought the theme could be parts of a whole is because in social studies, they're talking about parts of Texas, physical geography and human geography, and how that goes collectively to the whole of Texas. In science, we talk about parts of an organism. We talk about organelles, cells, tissues, organs, and the organism. And in ELA, it can be really anything in ELA that you want to talk about, so we're just going to use parts of a whole. And then cultures in a community, parts of a school, parts of a sentence for our writing, things like that. So my suggestion to the teachers that I work with is they reference the theme while teaching, and they're referencing other subjects while they're teaching. So in social studies, for example, you're talking about the different Native American tribes. And what did the different tribes do in Texas? Some were nomadic, some were hunters, some were traders. So how they were separate, but yet they were part of the whole part of Texas, and how they worked with one another sometimes in order to trade things, or how they battled with one another. Just like in science, your cell has organelles that has different parts, and they each have their own section and job that they work on, but they work together to make the whole of the cell work. So talking about how that combines together. Or when we're in English language arts and we're thinking about what our role is within our family, we're part of our family as a whole, but how do we work individually as ourselves? How are we part of that whole? Well, that's how the tribes were part of Texas, okay? So again, you're going back and you're using that theme of parts of a whole to go and do these different lessons, okay? So then I made a folder and I found some things. I love Common Lit. Common Lit is great. So I actually found this is about cells. So this is an informational text that I can have my 7th graders read in English language arts. And then I know that when they go to science, they are going to be learning about cells. So it just helps back up what the science teachers are teaching them. Then I chose this for English language arts. It's called The Medicine Bag. This was written in 1975. It's about a young man whose grandfather is getting older. His grandfather is a Native American, and he's come to their town, and at first the boy's embarrassed by him, but he learns to be proud of who he is, and he gets this. So it talks about that, and so I can again reference it back to social studies and what have you learned. And then I took this poem by Langston Hughes, and it's called Theme for English B, and he's talking about writing and what he needs to write and who he is as a person. And then he comes and he says, I learn from you, you learn from me, you're older and white and somewhat more free. This is my page for English B. So then it talks about how they are separate, but they learn from each other's lives. So I liked this all for English language arts. It goes in that parts of a whole. Then I made 2 activities, one for science and one for social studies. The one for social studies, again, you're letting them research a Native American tribe that lived in Texas, giving them this information. This is what they need to look up. These are all the things that they need to research. I gave them a place where they could start their research, but they can use other places. Then I made this template for them that they'll fill out. What's the name? How did they live? What were they like? Did they work with or against each other? Where are they now? So that they can see what happened to their tribe now in the present, where they used to live in Texas, because a lot of the tribes that lived in Texas, they no longer live in Texas. They've been relocated to reservations in other places, and how they contributed to Texas. When I come to the questions at the end, this is the big question. Compare and contrast what you are learning here to what you are currently learning in science. So it's having them make that connection. And because I, as the teacher, already know that in science, they're learning about cells and organelles, and I don't have to know what every organelle is. I get the students to tell me. That's the nice thing about it, is they're talking about it. But I can gently prod them and remind them that the Native Americans being part of Texas is like organelles being part of a cell. How is that similar? How is that different when they go and talk about this? So this is something that I made for social studies that they can do. Then for science, what I thought that they could do was read some information about the Texas cities. So I have information here about the cities or the boundaries or the landmarks, okay, or like the Gulf of Mexico, the state borders. And then what they're going to do is they're going to connect these to one another. So the state border lines that surround the state and allow things to move in and out of the state is like the cell membrane. So they can click on it and they can move it so that it's together, and I can see where they've moved it. And what I'm going to have them do is move, like Austin, I'm going to move Austin to here and move what goes with Austin over there. So I picked cities that had things that I thought they would find would be similar. And then they're going to tell me why I think blank is like blank because, and they're going to do it for all 5 of them. So they're going to do that comparison. So then there's that cross-curricular as well. So I'm getting that in. And of course, they're all reading and having some comprehension of how do these work together, right? So that is what I've created thus far for a cross-curricular for 7th grade for the first 6 weeks in the school year. I've already talked to the 8th grade teachers, and we're planning on doing something similar that has to do basically with grouping and how things are grouped, because they talk about how the settlers, when they came in, the reasons for coming to America was God and glory and gold, I think, pretty sure. And so grouping them into those categories and why did they come. And whereas in science, we're grouping based on the periodic table, and you know, these elements are more reactive, these are less reactive, these are more reactive, and things like that, so that we're looking at the periodic table. So I already have some ideas for that as well. I'm just going to create some stuff for the 8th grade and then 6th grade as well. So we're going to do that. This is something, if you're an elementary teacher, you would do basically as yourself, but you would create cross-curricular, so as they go through their whole day, everything has that connection, and they're thinking back to that theme of how does this all connect, so that they don't feel like everything in school is just this separate throwaway thing that they go to, and once they leave it, nobody cares, and I don't have to deal with it or think about it until I come back to it tomorrow or next week. So I'm hoping that we can do a lot more of this cross-curricular on my campus, and if you're interested, I hope you're doing it on your campus, so that we can get students to see how things connect to one another and how things in life are not just an island, and hopefully to get them to think more deeply and to think about their subjects more as they go about their day. I did not include math on here. I've been talking to the math teachers because math I can do, but not exceptionally well. That's just not my forte. but we already have some ideas to talk about it, you know, parts of a whole in math. Obviously, you're talking about fractions and things, but they're looking at number sense at the beginning. So we're talking about it a little bit more. If you have math ideas, definitely put them in the comments below. Let everybody know what your ideas are, and we'll be glad to implement them and work on those. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope you work on some cross-curricular, even if you start in your classroom and just have the kids in your classroom understand that the things are connected. A start is a start. Okay, thanks so much for tuning in to Gifted Guzman. I'll see you next time.